All right. Okay, I think we are live. Sorry. There's always a bit of delay. Let's see here. Okay, I think I'm live on Facebook. Sorry, let me just double check here. I guess better to disrupt now than later. Okay, there we go. All right. Looks like we are live. So I'll come back here. Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the session. Thanks for coming in. I just want to say thank you for joining me in the session for our sacred space time together for this, our 50th session of live sacred space. And as always, I'll just say that I am honored to be with you here in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you here in our shared sacred space today. So as always, the things we'll do together in our sacred space together today is to, number one, set sacred space. Number two, we'll have our kind of topic discussion of the week. And the topic this week will be dream within a dream. Dream within a dream. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that as we go forward. We'll have a bit of an exercise after that, and then we'll go ahead and close sacred space. So we'll go ahead and open sacred space, and in doing so, I'll start by saying what we would like to do here is to create a space together which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we choose to define that. It could be our inner muse or intuition or just random flashes of brilliant insight. But in order to do that, we would like to create a safe sanctuary space for us all to be able to relax and surrender with no danger or threat kind of feeling, so that we can partake of the emotional nourishment and spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. In an opening sacred space today, I will propose, as I do every week, that we all follow the 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. The first principle is confidentiality. Standard Vegas rules: what happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now, that's the rule when we're in person, when we're not in pandemic and we're kind of doing these sort of group sessions around the world. But here, because we're online, the stream is public, the replay will be public. So the way we do confidentiality online is via anonymization. Now, you don't have to be anonymous, but if you would like to be anonymous, as you chat, as you watch, as you ask questions and participate, the way you would do that is you would come into the Crowdcast stream, go into your edit profile feature, and then just change your username to Harry Potter, Mickey Mouse, whatever you'd like, and then continue participating from there. The second principle is that there is no threat or controlling, regardless of the intention. So even well-intentioned fixing, even well-intentioned interventions, or tough love, we try to refrain from doing that in sacred space. And the reason is that we would like here to hold space for each other, to be however we actually are, without judgment, certainly without assessment. And then, after assessment comes the prescription. Well, I need to come in and fix you and do this for you and tell you what you need to do. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but because that is of the physics of fear, threat, and control, that instantly takes us back into profane space, because that is the realm of fear, threat, and control. And as we always say, profane isn't bad, profane is just profane. Our role here is just to distinguish the flavors of profane versus sacred, like we distinguish the flavors of salty versus sweet. And then you, as the sovereign of your own life, right, you decide what your blend will be. But here, when we're in the sacred space every Sunday for an hour or two, right? We're here in order to share sacred space, right? This is like the tie that binds us, the golden thread that connects us all when we come together here. So we try to, not control each other. We try to hold space for each other to be however we are, to be afraid, to be anxious, or to be happy and relaxed, or to not know how we even feel, right? And then to allow ourselves and each other to feel however we feel about how we are, and even to feel that without any interference. So, for instance, if I'm afraid and I'm anxious, and I feel like incompetent, and even more anxious that I'm anxious because I'm a dunderhead that I should be afraid. We're okay that we hold space for you. If you feel outraged, I'm afraid and anxious, and of course I am in this time. Who wouldn't be, right? In fact, if you're anxious, you're an idiot, and you should be more anxious. Right? We ask you to refrain from that last part, but if you are righteous and feeling righteous about how you're feeling, we hold space for that too. Or if you're happy and relaxed and you feel guilty that you're happy and relaxed, or if you're happy and relaxed and you feel deserving of feeling happy and relaxed, we're okay with all of that. We simply hold space for however you find yourself here, now, in the present moment. And there's a nourishment that comes from just knowing that you can be however you are, and let down your guard. Turn over the card of how you are, and then see what's actually there. The third principle, which is a corollary to the above, is that there's no commerce in sacred space. So nothing may be sold in sacred space. I can't sell you anything. Gary can't sell you anything. Please don't sell things to each other in the chat, right? And this also includes recommendations. So even if I recommend something, if I say, oh, this was cool, that's fine. But if I'm like, oh, yeah, if you have that problem, you should read this book. And I may not get any financial remuneration for this recommendation. Even that we ask you to refrain from. Because even a recommendation for something is a kind of, well-meaning, but still threat. Or, right, if you don't read this great book I'm recommending, then the threat is, well, I won't get like the pain relief that you're saying I obviously will get because, my sister-in-law got it, so why wouldn't you? Right, so we refrain from recommendation, no commerce, no recommendations. And at a deeper level, it's because we are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. Right, we are here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. We're not here for your value add or your function. We are here for you. And then the fourth is no expectation of participation. So there's no pressure to do anything. You can chat or not chat, ask questions or not ask questions. Whatever you want to do is fine. You can leave in the middle. You can watch on replay. You can sort of watch half-heartedly, driving or like doing the laundry or whatever. That's all fine. Again, the nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And all of us together in a group here will tend to amplify that effect and amplify kind of this potluck of nourishment that we can all then partake of. Okay. So this is what I propose. And if you are not okay with this, that's totally okay. We'll still catch up with you later in profane space. We'll hang out, no worries at all. So there's no fear, threat, or control for you to come into sacred space or to stay in sacred space. But we are about to cross the threshold into sacred space. So if this is not, if that is not the destination you're intending, this is the plane. This is where this plane is taking off to. We will give you now a moment to pause and just withdraw from the group as you would like. And then we'll still catch up together later. So I'll just pause for a moment to let us all make our selection as to whether we would like to stay. Okay. All right, so now for the rest of us, we will now move forward together into sacred space. And as we now cross the threshold together into sacred space, our shared sacred space, I'll just remind everyone that we would like to observe the 4 principles of proceeding in sacred space: confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no tough love, no interventions, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right. Welcome to Sacred Space, everyone. Our 50th session. Happy Sunday. And thank you for being here, and thank you for your support. It's definitely one of the best parts of my week, and I hope it is for you as well. So our session topic this week will be Dream Within a Dream. In this session, we will read an Indian folktale that Gauri, my editor in Bangalore, has selected. And we'll read it for some of its mythopoetic insights, as we normally do. But at the same time, we will also explore, and this is kind of from Gauri's prodding, right? We will explore this kind of additional intriguing aspect of this particular folktale, because this particular folktale involves a dream that is pursued within the folktale itself. In other words, a dream within a dream. And so what are the physics of symbol and mythopoetics? When we are reading them from the waking world, not one level in, but two levels in, as a dream within a dream. Right, this is the added question we will try to explore a little bit in our session today. Okay, so I'll ask Gauri to come up on screen and say hello to everyone and tell us about the folktale she has selected for this week. Hi, Gauri.
Hi, Artie. Hi, everyone.
Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us about the folktale you've selected?
Yeah, so it's a folktale from a tribal tradition from northern and eastern part of India. I think it's the same tradition, the Santali folk tradition, from where I pulled out the story of the story and song. I think that was one of the first stories that we did. So it moves interestingly like a typical fairy tale of a king and a prince and magical creatures and probably a magical woman and all of that. But there is something very interesting in how it deals with the aspect of dreams itself. And I found myself resonating with the dream that appears in the story, because I kind of could recognize the characters in the dream. Because I've seen a dream like that with those characters, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, that's something I've met them before. So
your own dream life.
Yeah, from my own dream. So it was interesting that way to kind of think about what do dreams signify in stories and in fairy tales, right? So yeah, so that's where I come into it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do you want to bring us into the story and tell it for us?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the story, the title of the story itself is In Search of a Dream. Right. So the story begins with a king, and this is a king who, who right at the start of the story. So this king had no children, had no sons, no daughters, no children at all. And so he marries again and, takes another wife in the hope of having children. And the second wife bears him 2 sons, and this makes the king very happy. And he thinks, oh, finally I have heirs, so I don't have to worry now. And as it happens, after the 2 sons were born, the elder queen also gave birth to a son. And now the conflict begins, right? So there's kind of insecurities, there's fear and resentment and all sorts of things that come into play, because the younger queen now thinks, oh, what if the king now prefers the son of the elder queen to become his heir, and therefore I get sidelined, and where would my kids go, and all of those things. So she then ends up persuading the king to send away the elder wife, the elder queen, and her son. And the king listens to her. So he then sends away this queen, his first wife. He gives her a separate estate and a separate house, but basically she moves out of the palace and is no longer with him. And after many years, one night the king has a dream, and in this dream he sees a golden leopard and a golden snake and a golden monkey, all of them dancing together. And when he wakes up, he wonders about what the meaning of the dream was, what it meant, what it tried to convey. And he can't rest until he's found out. So he talks to his second wife and the two sons. He tells them about the dream and he asks them, what do you think this means? I mean, what is it trying to say? And they can't offer any insight. They don't know what it means, and they just listen to it and like, okay, nothing. And but at this time, the youngest son makes a suggestion. He says, I don't know, but maybe your other son could probably offer some insight, and I think you should ask him. So then the king summons the elder wife's son and brings him in, and he tells him this dream. And asks him, do you have any insight? Do you know what this dream is trying to tell me? And the son says, it seems to me that this is what I think, this is my interpretation, right? It seems to me that the three golden animals represent us three brothers. Now we need harmony between us, but that's not going to happen as long as there is this constant conflict of who will become the king after you, who will succeed you. And all three of us can't become kings, and you will have to choose one over the other. And as long as you have to choose one, we will always have reasons to fight. So I think God sent this dream to you to say that if you need harmony, then the one person who can find these three golden animals, bring them over and make them dance, will be the one to succeed the throne. So it's up to us to find these animals. And the king listened to it and he said, okay, yeah, this kind of makes sense. I'm very happy to hear this. And he tells his sons that you have 1 year. I would like you to come back in 1 year's time, back to the same place. And we'll see whoever has found those animals and makes them dance. I will give my kingdom to him. And as they heard this, the sons of the younger queen, they thought about it. And then they decided that it was quite useless for them to even try, right? So they don't know what golden animals these are, where to find them, let alone make them dance. Now, you could argue that, probably could go to a goldsmith and have these golden animals made, because then, how do you make them dance? So any which way they looked at the problem, they decided we're not going to be able to tackle it anyway, so we're just giving up. Now, the elder queen's son went back home after this, and he told his mother about the entire situation. She told him that, you don't worry, there is a way, and you have to find this monk who lives in a deep part of the jungle. And once you consult him, he can tell you what you should do, how to find these animals. Now, when he heard this, that he basically decided that he would take this journey to find this monk. So he set out into the forest, traveled for about 2 days. And after searching for a long time, he finally kind of spotted a fire burning in the distance. He went and sat down by the fire, and he was tired, so he sat down and started to smoke. And the smell of the smoke is what woke up this monk who was sleeping nearby. And as he woke up, he looked at this young man and said, Who are you and what do you want? And the young man told the monk why he was there and why he'd come to ask for his help, and this is what he wanted. Now, the monk, before he could offer him anything, he said, okay, it's time to eat. So he put out a cooking pot to boil, and then he put 3 grains of rice in it. And yet when it was cooked, there was enough food to feed the both of them, right? So they had this meal, and then the young man repeated his question. And the monk said, well, I can't tell you what to do, but if you go deeper into the jungle, you'll find my brother, and you should go to him and he will help you. And so, the next morning, the prince set out and, he traveled for 2 more days, and he found the second monk and he told him what he wanted. And this monk also listened and he said, all right, but let's first have something to eat. And he put a cooking pot to boil, and he put 2 grains of rice in it. And by the time it was cooked, there was enough for the 2 of them. So they ate their meal. And then the monk said, well, farther ahead in the jungle, I have another brother who lives there, and you must meet him, and he will tell you what to do. Right? So the same thing happens. The next day he sets out, travels a bit, and finds the third monk. And when he reaches there, it's already kind of, evening, end of the day. And the monk welcomes him, puts another cooking pot to boil, and this time he puts just 1 grain of rice. And that's enough. It makes a meal enough for both of them. And then this monk listens to the problem, and he says thoughtfully, right, so here's what you do. You go to a blacksmith and you get a shield made of iron. And this shield needs to be so sharp at the edge that if a leaf falls on it, the leaf must cut into 2 pieces. That's how sharp it needs to be. So get that done and come back to me and I'll tell you what to do. So this young man goes and gets this shield made, and he goes back to the monk and shows him the shield. So then the monk says, okay, let's test the shield out. He takes it to a tree and asks the young man to kind of shake the tree so that leaves could fall. And this young man tries, and not a single leaf falls down. So then the monk himself places the shield edgewise on the ground, and then touches the tree in the gentlest way, and then leaves start just falling. And when that happens, all the leaves that fall on the shield just quickly get cut into 2. And that's how sharp the shield was. So now the monk's satisfied that this is done. And then he tells the young man that you need to set out and find, at a certain distance, there's a bamboo house. And in this house, there live 2 snakes, and they're guarding their daughter inside the house. They don't let her come out. So what you need to do is place this shield at the door so that when the snakes come out, they get cut into pieces. It's only then that the daughter will be able to come out of the house. Find the daughter, talk to her, tell her your problem, and she'll help you find the animals. And so the prince next morning, he sets out. He travels a little farther again in the jungle, and he finds this bamboo house, just like the monk said. And, in the house, he sees these 2 snakes slithering around. He hides behind a tree, waits for an opportune moment, and he goes and places this shield right at the door. And the next time the 2 snakes, come out to the doorway, they get caught at the edge of the shield, and they get cut into pieces. And after a while, as the prince is still hiding behind the tree to watch what happens next, slowly the daughter kind of peeps out of the doorway to see what's happened. And she finds the snakes dead, and she starts to cry, and she says, beautiful, beautiful young woman. So the prince then immediately walks up to her, tells her, the situation of what happened. And as he talks to the maiden and he looks at her, she's so beautiful, and he consoles her as she's grieving. And they both fall in love. And then after that, the prince and the snake maiden stay in the house for many days together. And the prince still hasn't told her why he's there, right? So they stay there, and the snake maiden warns him that you're not to go outside the house in the south and the west and the southwest directions. No matter what you do, just don't go in those directions, and you'll be fine. And days pass by. And one day, the young man disobeys, and he goes out to the west. And when he walks a bit of a distance in the west, he finds suddenly there are these golden leopards dancing. I mean, this is exactly what he's come for. But before he could even understand what's going on, the moment he spots those golden leopards, he turns into a golden leopard himself, right? And the snake maiden gets wind of what's going on. She comes there, finds him, fetches him back, and turns him back into human shape. This happens again 2 more times. Once he strays towards the south direction, he finds golden snakes dancing, and as soon as he spots that, he becomes a golden snake himself. And the snake maiden rescues him again, right? The 3rd time he goes in the southwest direction and he finds golden monkeys dancing. He turns into a golden monkey, and the snake maiden gets him back. She turns him back into human shape. But now that he's seen all these 3 golden animals, which, was hard to believe that even existed, but now he knew they were there, he finally tells the snake maiden why he's there and that he needs to go back home now. And she says, "Oh, so if you go back, what's to become of me?" And the prince says, "Well, I will take you along with me. I'm not going to leave you here." And that makes her happy. But he says, "I still have a problem. I've found these animals. I know they exist, but I don't know how to take them back or to make them dance on the designated day." To which the snake maiden says, "Okay, you promised me this, that you will take me back with you. You will never abandon me, and you will never take another wife. And if you can promise me that, I will make the animals dance for you, and that's fine. Just leave that to me." And so the prince is happy at this, and they, make arrangements and decide to go back. On the way back, he kind of has to go through the 3 monks in the reverse order, right? The 3rd monk and the 2nd monk and the 1st monk. And he tells the snake maiden that, when I was coming to find you, I had promised this monk that I would show him the golden animals, but I don't know. I don't have them now. What do I do? So the maiden then makes 3 knots in his shirt and says, "When you meet him, just untie the knots and the animals will appear." So he goes to this 3rd monk and greets him and tells him, I've come back and I found the animals. And the monk says, "Oh, where are they now? Can I see them?" He says, I'm not so sure. I mean, I don't know where the animals are, but I think I have something in my shirt. So let me show you what I have." And he unties the knots in the shirt. But what happens is, from each knot, there's a clod of earth, and then there's a broken piece of a pot and a piece of charcoal that fall out of the shirt into the ground. And this man's disappointed. So he goes back to the snake maiden and says, "I don't know what happened, but this is what I found when I untied the knots." And the maiden says, well, that's because you didn't believe when I said that untying the knots would produce the animals. So you need to have more faith. The next time, believe in what I've told you, that this is what will happen and the animals will appear. And so they move on, and he comes to the second monk's place. And this time, he unties the knots. And just as she said, the golden animals appear. And so he's happy with this. And then the next time with the first monk, the same thing happens. And finally, they go back home. Now, after a year passes and, it's time to go to the king and to show him what he's found, he sends word to the king saying, I've come back and I've found the animals, but please, could you arrange for a ceremony where, there's large field where you have these public events. So could you set up shelters and booths on this large field, and I would come there to publicly demonstrate the animals and how they dance. And so the king does make all those arrangements. And then he also specifically says, can you have a covered path made from my mother's house all the way to the field so I could, bring the animals. And so that's done. And on that day, there are large crowds, people from everywhere in the kingdom who've gathered to see this marvelous event. Golden animals who just show up in the field and start dancing. So the booths, the shelters, they're all crowded, right? And people are watching. And the prince comes in, and he produces. Now he has learned that he can produce the animals when he wants. So he produces these 3 golden animals: the golden leopard, the golden snake, and the golden monkey. And meanwhile, the snake maiden has hidden away from everyone, but she's close by, and she makes them dance. And the whole the field, the booths and the shelters and everyone starts cheering, and they're entertained. They watch completely. They're in rapture and they don't want to go back. So that the entire day goes, and they're watching this amazing event. And finally, when the night falls, they kind of reluctantly go back. And the amazing thing that happens is when everyone leaves at night, all the booths and all the shelters turn into houses of gold. And when he saw this, the king has this moment where he realizes he decides that this son from his elder wife will be his successor and king. But he also decides to go back to live with his elder wife. And the prince marries the snake maiden, and he inherits the kingdom, and he rules the kingdom justly and happily after that. So that's the story. Artie, do you want to come in? Yeah, hi.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I think that was even better the second time, because I could really sort of just get lost in the details.
Yeah.
And I made a bunch more notes, so I don't know how this explanation part is going to go.
Right.
So let me start with my usual question, which is, where do you enter into that story? Where does that story move you?
Okay, I'll start with the lesser details first. The kind of less significant details, if I could say, is, I could now resonate with the recurring motif of the number 3. And I noticed that everything happened in a cycle of 3. Right, there were 3 monks that he has to cross before he comes to the maiden. And when he's with the maiden, there are 3 directions she forbids him from going to, and then but he anyway, right? So he goes 1, 2, and 3, and he finds those 3 animals. And he has to collect these animals before he can claim his final prize, which is the kingdom. very, very resonant with, the story Princess on the Glass Hill that we did a few weeks ago, with how Cinderlad, goes about finding his 3 horses and then 3 apples before he finally can claim the princess, right? So there's that. I was kind of subconsciously noticing that thing and saying, okay, there it is, the 3 again. But what really caught my attention is the fact that there was this dream, and the entire story revolves around that dream and reading an interpretation of that dream. And as I was reading it, I was like, so they're doing a dream reading session now. I mean, this is what kind of healing. So let's see how they do it. And when I go into, how are they reading this? I mean, they take it literally.
Right, not mythopoetically.
Not mythopoetically, right. Literally. Like, let's find these golden animals because they showed up in our dream.
Right.
I mean, this happens. I mean, it's. I've found this quite often in fairy tales. When dreams appear in fairy tales, this prince dreamed of a princess and then he set out to find her, right? Or he dreamt of a castle beyond the seas and then he set out to find it. So there's this literal pursuit that happens of whatever that is that appears in the dream. It's not symbolic, it's actual thing. I felt very intrigued by that. So what is the mechanism here? How do they read dreams within fairy tales? Like what goes on here and what's it trying to say? What's a dream trying to say when it comes in a fairy tale?
All right. And that's why you brought this one to me.
Yeah, that's how I brought it to you.
Which, when you first said it, I kind of rolled my eyes and I was like, oh, so it's this intellectual reason why you brought this to me.
Yeah.
Which counts, I guess, right? But yeah, it was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's totally the part of the dream within a dream, right? That really struck me as well. And it's funny because, I joke about how you're like, oh, you're bringing this to me not from like your muse, but you have this like intellectual question you'd like me to talk about. So you take this fairy tale and stick it in. And it's a very similar thing to what happens in the dream, where you start with the intellect and the inner masculine, and then that leads you into the inner feminine, which I'll get to in a minute. But it's the whole thing of like mythopoetic versus concrete, or as we say, like Cartesian, right? I think it's interesting here that in the fairy tale, which is already our dream, right? Within this dream, there is then another dream that needs to interpret it. And what we always say here is when we from the waking world have a dream, we interpret it mythopoetically, right? So, and the quick shorthand there is, we regard the dream mythopoetically, so not literally. And then the way we read the dream is we regard every individual major actor in the dream as a symbol of a separate part of our own inner kingdom, right? So all the parts of the dream are me, are us, right? But different parts of us. So the snake maiden is obviously this sort of inner feminine figure. The 3 monks is an inner masculine figure. The mother leading through the inner masculine to get to this higher level inner feminine is also, this another aspect of the inner feminine, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's interesting because when a dream presents itself to us, we live, in the modern world at least, in a relatively Cartesian world, where we're like, oh, intellect is everything, science is everything. If I can't measure it and control it with an experiment, then I can't exactly deny its existence, because that would, sort of pull the veil back on like everything I'm saying is like empirical and real. So I still have to like name and account for these things that I can't actually control and predict. But I just say, oh, random chance. I put everything in the random chance. Yeah. And when I can't control something, I just happen to not direct my experiment lens in that direction. I direct it into something I can actually control. So the dream, when it comes in, comes as a kind of balancing factor, right? Almost as an antidote to the Cartesian world of like basically disembodied intellect. So when a dream comes to you, it's a balancing factor. And when you think of all like, the great visionaries of the world, they tend to have this very curious, powerful, but very curious blend of inner masculine and inner feminine, right? And as we always say, sort of inner feminine, regardless of your gender, we all have inner masculine and inner feminine principles within us. You can call it yin yang, left, right, light, dark. But when we read fairy tales and we have dreams, the inner masculine typically shows up as like, your dad or, your stupid brother-in-law, right? Or whatever. And so we just kind of, relax and just roll with it and read the signs as they come. And inner masculine, as we say, is the principle where the main functions are protection, boundary control, and then manifestation, going out and making things happen in the sort of real world, in the external world. And the inner feminine is this principle within each of us, regardless of our gender, of nurturing nourishment, but then also vision. Right? The inner feminine is the holder of our vision. Right? All of the Greek muses, all 9 of them, are feminine, and they are daughters of the 3 graces, which are again all feminine. And this is not an accident, right? So vision comes from the feminine. Mythopoetic vision on the feminine side, and on the masculine side, then the ability to reify it, right, to actually concretize it. And the greatest visionaries of the world have a blend of both. You think of Picasso or Hemingway or Steve Jobs or Annie Leibovitz or any of these, sort of leading visionaries. They all have the ability to see vision, but actually also put it into concrete practice through one way or another. Right? When you have too much of one or the other, then the dream, if you're open to it, right, which is like a kind of an initial condition or initial sort of question. If you're open to the dream, which can come when you're sleeping, can come in like daydreaming, fantasy, can come in reading, just sort of actually chance encounters, things you read, things you watch in the movies, and taking them mythopoetically as dreams, as guidance. The dream is the reflex of what you can almost call like the grace of the universe, right? Or you might say the 3 graces of the universe working through the muses to bring you the dream. The dream is the reflex of the grace of the universe that comes in to balance things, right? In Greek plays or overdone plays where the plot is so twisted, right, that you can't possibly untwist it, they always bring in Deus ex machina, right? So the God within the machine, just, Hercules or Athena coming down in her chariot, right, at like the end of the Odyssey to basically just make sure everyone doesn't fight going forward. And then you just sort of, deal with the plot from there. It's so twisted that the gods need to come down and untangle things for you. And a dream, as an act of divine grace, is kind of like that, right? Sometimes we have these big dreams when we wake up and we're like, oh, I'm fine now. No, I don't need to drink or smoke anymore. I'm done. I had the dream and I'm basically done. So what happens then? So that's sort of waking world into dream. What happens then where within that dream there is nested another dream? Right now, fairy tale itself is all mythopoetic. And so when there's a dream within a dream, you can argue that it's trying to bring you back into the concrete, back a little bit into the Cartesian from the mythopoetic, because the inner dream is the balancer for the outer dream, just like the whole dream is the balancer for us. So when they interpret it, when the king and the eldest and the sort of son of the elder wife interprets the dream, they say the golden snake is not just a symbol of your, what would golden snake be, like inner feminine embodied insight, right? Snake, feminine, animal embodiment, gold is insight. It is a literal golden snake. Go get it. This is the dream time anyway. Get off your behind and go get it, right? And so the trick for me is that reading it from the outside, then reading the dream within a dream, is that this prince, right, the masculine factor, is being led to go back into the realm of overall, what you can say is embodiment and faith, right? All three of these figures are animals, so they're symbols of embodiment, as we've said in countless sessions before. The gold represents insight, right? So healing insight, flashes of insight, basically downloads from the muse. Okay, and for this inner masculine, right, the message of the dream within a dream as we read it, and there are other physics we'll get into, but the message of the dream within a dream is, go back into the realm of embodiment and faith. One of the things he learns is to have faith, to have more faith, right, in the feminine, among other things. And the point here, if we read this within the layers, is to say, you can take it mythopoetically, you can take it symbolically, but when you go in and do it, we mean for you to actually do it. Right? And we encounter this in our more intellectual sort of realms. So, me and Gary always talking right through this disembodied kind of crowdcast online venue. We're not even in person. We can't hug. We can't shake hands right now anyway, right? We always encounter this dynamic with embodiment where it's like we end up getting the message to go back into embodiment. We end up saying, intellectually embodiment, that's interesting. But then we often don't actually do it, right? We take it as this brilliant insight, and then we don't actually do it. And so here, the dream within a dream, leveraging those physics, it's saying, you're having this dream about the golden animals. We mean for you to actually go and get them, right? Which then 2 levels out for us is mythopoetically embodiment and faith, which may be like, I don't have enough embodiment and faith. That's fine. Now, actually go and do it. Go get the golden animals, which is however you think about embodiment, do the embodiment thing. And in terms of having faith, you say, I have to have more faith, and then you don't have faith in this inner voice of the inner feminine within you. You actually do it, right? You actually take the leap of faith in your life. So that's kind of the overall thumbnail. And let me kind of skim through and give some other highlights as well. Gary already talked about the number 3. Here we see the number 3 left and right again. 3 suns, 3 monks, 3 animals, 3 grains of rice. We've talked about the significance of the number 3. I'm not going to go into it again here. But it basically says we're going through some kind of cycle here. And that's okay, right? There's nothing to be alarmed. Seasons are cyclical. Human life is cyclical, birth, midlife, and death, and then it happens again and again. And so we go through the sequence in order to figure out who is going to be the heir, which of these sons is going to take over, okay? And how do you fix this? How do you fix this? And the way to fix this, right, how do you figure out which parts of these emerging inner masculines will be the sort of captain of the ship of your life? How do you decide? Right, in any of these stories where there are 3 brothers or 3 sisters, right? Cinderella, there's the 2 false brides, and then the real bride, Cinderella. The first 2 will typically symbolize kind of the bully voices within you, like go get money, go get prestige, who's going to love you if you do this stupid sort of Cinderella stuff. And how do you even, so obviously in Cinderella, it's like, okay, Cinderella is the correct one because the name of the story is Cinderella, right? But in real life within yourself, you have these 3 competing elements. How do you discern which one is the one that you want to sort of, give the ball to run all the way across the goal line, right? And there are real stakes here. This is like the next 30 years of your life, right? It matters how you decide and whether you make a good decision. And so the story tells us that the way to fix this is you have to bring these elements in physically. They have to be embodied. Whatever you choose, you have to actually do it, right? And not just talk about doing it. Bring them back for real, not just on an intellectual armchair level. And all 3 of them, right? Not just the best or the winner or the strongest. In other words, no part of you gets exiled. All 3 are valid. All 3 have a place. When we talk about who the leader is, it's not winner take all. Right? It won't do, in other words, to kill the other sons and get on with it. Right? There has to be insight around it, golden. And they have to be in harmony, which really resonates for us because when we do our healing work with our advisees, right? It's all the voices within you, all the life forces within you brought in back to the table. No one gets exiled anymore because they become like the freedom fighters or terrorists, right? Depending on your lens, throwing in the grenades when you're trying to decide on how to go forward with your life, because you've deprived them of their vote. You've deprived them of their valid voice, right? So no one gets exiled anymore. You bring them all in and you work out how to reconcile them. In other words, how to make them all dance together. Okay. And so the physics here of the dream within a dream gives us this added layer of insight, because the question is, well, okay, fine. I need to go out, bring these things back to me and get them harmonized, dancing. How do I do it? Right. And the story basically outlines a diorama of how this happens. So the first thing you do is you go to the inner feminine, your mother, for vision, right? The inner mother. She tells you just the first couple breadcrumb steps of the vision. She doesn't give you the full path. She just gives you the next step. Go to the monk, which is a disembodied, intellectual inner masculine. Right? Monks around the world trying to, dress the same every day, do the same thing. A lot of tech titans are sort of like this, where they try to sort of disembody themselves and abstract more and more and more, because it gives them more power and prestige and money, but only in the Cartesian world, right? So they become like emotionally starved, and they continue pushing further and further into the realm of ideas. And you see them physically. They just you're very impressed with their power and money, but when you look at them and when you meet them, it's like it's very dry. It's very scraggly and skeletal, right? There isn't this feeling of like incredible, power in one sense, but this feeling of warmth, emotion, of well-roundedness isn't there. And they would say, well, yeah, right, bitch, that's by design, right? Look at how powerful I am, shut up, right? And you're back in the world of fear, threat, and control. And if you go too far in that and you lose sort of this other feeling, not just warmer and softer, but this other flavor of the sacred, it's what we've said, it's that Pyrrhic victory, right? Where you've won the battle spectacularly, but you've lost the war, right? So you go to these monks away from the physical. They don't eat anything, right? They eat 1 or 2 grains of rice, and that like gives you the full meal. And this actually is celebrated in their forest dweller realm. And this is my own bias, but it's like, if you're going to do this and celebrate it, why come into the physical world in the first place? You can just stay in the Deva realm, right? If you're going to come here and stay here, this is just like the story of the Buddha telling the woman with the mustard seeds and the child who died, right? If you're going to stay here, right, let us be at peace and our ease, and let us enjoy not just the intellectual, but the physical paradise we have been born into, right? Of course, you can say, well, this is how I enjoy it, to be this sort of aesthetic monk, and that's okay, right? Masculine, right? Masculine, intellectual, and disembodied. This is the symbol of the monk. And does his magic trick to fill you up, right? But it is disconnected. Because in reality, in the embodied physical world, how does actually 1 grain of rice feed 2 full-grown men? The answer is it doesn't. The gap is bridged through disembodiment and intellect. Okay. And again, just like sacred and profane, I'm not saying one is good and the other is bad. If you are okay with that, right, carry on, no action needed. Right? There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing bad with you. It's simply, if you like your desserts or food all salty and no sweet, and that's just the way you like it, carry on, no action needed. Okay. But this is the phase we go through to even get to the realm of the inner feminine, the snake maiden. Right? In other words, we go through these 3 successive phases. We complete the cycle of this inner masculine disembodied intellect until we get the shield with the edge, this iron shield, right? With this edge that is so sharp that the, I mean, it's very telling, but in these, in the mythopoetic realms of like multiple traditions, certainly in like the Arthurian sort of Fisher King Grail cycle tradition, a cutting, right? So a lance is a symbol of like discernment, right? Sort of separating, like a winnowing fan, a lance is a symbol of discernment. But a sword is a symbol of the hacking intellect, right? So where you use the intellect, which is super sharp, to basically, not carve, not sort of discern grain of sand by grain of sand, but just to hack away at whole parts of like whatever it is you're doing, right? You can't sculpt something delicate with a sword that's hacking away. And here, not only is it not a sword, it's a shield. It's something you defend yourself against. And the question, of course, is what are you defending against? Where the intellect is so sharp that even when the leaves fall from the tree, the most delicate things that come from this, tree of life are separated. There's more I can say about like, why is it that leaves fall and fruit doesn't fall, which is, more of the symbol of fully sort of rounded embodied wisdom. You only get the leaves, which you can't really eat. You can make some weak tea from them. But that's kind of all that this intellect is good for, is another way of reading it. Just as a side note here, I'm going to go through the rest of the story in the same way that I do individual dream reading when we do our live group advising every Friday, which is I'll skim through and just pick out the major symbols that jump out at me in order to give you the entry point. And then if you want, you can go in and do the rest of the mythopoetics on your own. Because, when we do these Friday sessions of live group advising, it's like people will put on like dream series of like 5 or 6 dreams that they've had over weeks or sometimes in a single night because they're in the middle of their cycle. So it's like really firing up. And we can't go into every last detail. And it would indeed be counterproductive to do so because then we get super intellectual. And when we get to the like, okay, so it's Monday morning, 8 a.m. What do you actually do? We lose track of that. So in exactly the same way here, even in this public forum, I'm not going to go into every last detail of the symbols. You don't have to either, but you can. I'll give you the possible entry points, and then you can do the interviews with the key characters yourself. So back to our story. We're now like after the monks in the realm of the inner feminine. And the key part of inner feminine is not intellect, but a number of other things. The first is submission. Another is embodied union, right? And then, as we've said before, faith. So we'll get to all these in a moment. So when we get past the inner masculine intellectual phase or part of the cycle, and we'll come back again in a future cycle because this is a cyclical thing. You have multiple rounds of this cycle over the course of a, let's just call it biological single human life, right? When you come out finally of the scraggly, skeletal, emaciated, disembodied, intellectual, inner masculine phase, which, by the way, is all about control and not about pleasure, right? It's like our pleasure comes from the fact that we can get by on just 1 grain of rice. So when you come out of that and into the inner feminine realm, the blade, the sword, the shield, the sharp shield of intellect, right, cuts up the initial sort of 2, because there's 3 snakes, right? There's the 2 parent snakes and the snake maiden, who is also a snake. Although she presents as a beautiful feminine. Snake and the feminine are interchangeable here. In a good way. It's only in the Abrahamic sort of Genesis tradition, Hellenic tradition, that snake, i.e. feminine, gets demonized because the patriarchy rises up and pushes down the feminine. Okay. So the intellect cuts up the defenders of like, you basically go through a triple feminine as well, but the masculine intellect basically, cuts through until you get to a thing that you can't cut. Right? Because it's interesting, because the maiden walks through too, and she doesn't get cut by this like little dinky masculine sort of sharp intellect. And it's an interesting question. Why is that? Why doesn't she get cut? Why does the highest level not get cut? But basically, when you get to this highest level of inner feminine, right? When you go through the forest, you're not submitting to the masculine. You're like sharing power. You're smoking. You're waking the dude up. He's like sharing his campfire with you. It's all very collegial and bro-y, and that's fine. When you get to the highest inner feminine, right? It's not collegial. It is union, but also at a very deep level, it is submission. It is submission, right? You submit to the inner feminine, who holds the central vision of your life. You submit to the muse. You submit to the graces. And when you have this, part of this sort of cycle of submission, the beginning of it is this feeling of embodied union. What I mean by this is the first thing the prince and the snake maiden do, he doesn't even tell her his mission, right? She sees him immediately. They sort of have union, and they basically shack up for like several days. So they have full union with their bodies, an embodied pleasure and delight, right? So you get past this phase of intellectualism, and you are led in through pleasure and delight. That's the first order. And by the way, again, this is all within you. So embodied pleasure and delight. And then the second phase, right, is faith. Right? And submission as a part of that faith. This comes into all of these feminine figures, the snake maiden, Baba Yaga, negotiations with the crone, and also how you interact with your muse. You can argue with your muse, you can bitch and moan, but at the end of the day, when she's like, there's no debating point by point. I'm telling you, this is the overall next step of your direction. Take it or leave it. And after a while, you're just like, okay, I'm just going to sort of shut up and get on with it, right? And you have blind faith. She leads you, your highest inner feminine. She leads you, and you blindly follow. Right? Even Hemingway, like working through his insane levels of alcoholism, like through the middle and end of his life, would comment that, I'm like a blind pig when I'm working, right? You're just sniffing for truffles. She's like laying them out for you. You can't see her. You can't even see the truffles. You're just kind of going forward on blind faith. So he does this. And the thing here is, she exhibits, right, persistent, abiding, and pre-existing faith ongoing, which definitely foots with, our experience with the muse, where, let's just put it this way. No matter how much you don't have faith in her, how much you don't even have faith in yourself, for whatever reason, dumb slob that you are, right? She chose you. She chose you, right? And at the end of the day, it's sort of like you can really spiral down and say, well, I'm screwing up. I didn't make it. She continues to have faith in you and patience with you. And then the only deepest thing that is like almost like the worst thing you can do, right, is to start questioning her judgment, right, as well, where it's like, well, maybe she made a mistake in choosing me, right? And it's like, she loves you, she chose you, right? You can like go off and not, you can take it or leave it. You can leave it if you want, right? But don't take the next step and not actually insult her, right, by saying that she made the wrong choice, right? Especially if you think you're a dumb slob, then like, don't use your shitty judgment to like question her judgment as well, right? She made the choice and she chose you. So here, you see it in the form of this young man breaks faith 3 times. Again, the number 3. He goes west, he goes south, he goes southwest. He could have just asked her what lies there, right? But this is the dance between the sort of incredible muse, inner feminine, and the chucklehead form of the inner masculine. So he goes, he breaks faith. She tells him not to do it. Of course, he does it anyway, and he can't get himself out of the situation. He goes to the leopards, he goes to the snakes, he goes to the monkeys. And the thing is, he doesn't just see them and start plotting, like, how do I capture one of these? He is instantly turned into one of them, right? This is the same dynamic of, like, in previous stories, like the 190 guys that came before you. These all are the monkeys who, like, are presumably other guys who went to that realm and got swept up into the embodiment of that form and had no inner feminine to rescue them, right? She doesn't get angry. She's almost like expecting it. Pulls him out. And then after the 3rd time, he finally, right, comes back and tells her what he needs. And she says, well, okay. And then just like Baba Yaga, the best thing to do is to make a deal. And here, because she's not as scary, she's the one who proposes the deal. She doesn't even wait for your initiative. And she says, well, you need to take me back with you and promise, et cetera, not to leave me. And he says, okay. So the point here is she has had faith all the time. And remember, they start out by him killing her parents, and she still has faith on him. Right? He breaks her faith 3 times. He goes through with the 3 knots. He doesn't have faith. And the clod of earth, charcoal, all that stuff is all about not having faith, right? And when they go through that adventure, he gains and learns faith in her, and her faith has been unshakable this whole time. Now, again, I'll just remind you again, because our natural reflex is to project this out into the outer world. This is not an allegorical thing saying, oh, it's okay for guys to be faithless to their female partners, and the female partners need to always be faithful. That's not what this is saying. This is the inner masculine and the inner feminine within you, right? The dynamics. If you are female, if you're male, if you're non-binary, whatever your declared outer gender is, these are 2 principles within each one of us as human beings. So when they go through that circumambulatory adventure together, he gains faith. And then as a result, he gains the power of insight and embodiment, i.e. he gains the animals. And they harmonize within the whole kingdom. This is actually echoed back on the home front with the original Father King, right? One of the sort of things, questions is, how is the kingdom complete, right? And the issue with the father inner masculine king is that he can't get straight which inner feminine he's supposed to be with, right? And of course, the 1st and 2nd wife are both aspects of the singular inner feminine. He is with one aspect of the inner feminine, then with another. And it shows a lack of faith. It's a mismatch in coordination between the 2. Mythopoetically, right? It's like trusting your inner muse. Are you dealing with the crone part, the muse part, or the Baba Yaga part, or the snake maiden part? You go through trial and error. And the point is, it's okay. It's not allegorical, like you better be faithful to this wife or that wife, or you better be good to the snake maiden, because they both screw up, the inner masculines, and it turns out to be okay, typically because of the ongoing faith of the inner feminine. Even the emerging masculine, who becomes king in the end significantly, right? Even the son makes the same mistakes. He doesn't have enough faith in the snake maiden, and he learns also. But all of this learning comes through the patience and temperance of the inner feminine, the holder of vision, right? It's almost like the inner feminine, who is the holder of vision, the 30,000-foot vision. From that perch, she sees the whole pattern of everything, which also means that she knows you're going to screw up, right? She knows you will screw up, and she's almost like accounted for that at her like high level divine feminine wisdom. Right? And anyone who has had extended dealings with your inner muse knows what this is about, right? Your muse knows you're going to screw up. Your muse knows that even if you follow as a blind pig, when she leads you to the edge of the cliff, you're still going to balk and run away for like years before you come back again. And she knows that that's part of the journey, right? And when you realize she's known this all along, right? It kind of, it's this next level of integration with the inner feminine. It makes you fall in love with her even more. It makes you care for her, and it makes you feel cared for and protected even more. Okay, so then at the mythopoetic level, where we are reading the whole fairy tale together with the dream embedded. Some of the nice things of the story are that the inner feminine brings us insight around faith and embodiment. Right? She brings us these golden insight animals around embodiment, harmony, and faith in her power to do all this for us, even though we stutter step and stumble all the way through. To extend it one more step forward, what develops here in the story is faith in embodiment itself. Faith in the three golden animals within you, not just as interesting concepts at the monk level, but actually embodied things that you end up doing in your life, right? The redeeming act of faith of the king, by the way, who's like can't decide between the two wives, is that when the son says, we need to actually get these animals to get harmony in the kingdom, right? His redeeming act of faith is to say, okay, he has faith in this youngest son of his, right? The king puts faith in that. He doesn't renege on his deal. After he comes back with the three animals, he doesn't say, oh, I still like this other brother, so I'm going to make him he doesn't renege on any of that. He isn't persuaded by the other queen to renege again. The son, also very significant, who has now learned the power of faith. You know this because at the end of the story, he does not go back on his vow to not abandon the snake maiden, right? And this happens all the time in stories, right? In the Greek tradition, it's Jason with Medea or Theseus with Ariadne. So for me, that's kind of an interesting and nice reading of the story. Okay. So I want to come back then to this aspect of dream within a dream, given all this. Because here, remember, this is all of this happening with the snake, with the snake maiden and the three animals. This is all the sort of spurred on by the dream within a dream. And the fact that when they read it within the dream, they read it as concrete, right? As a balancing factor to the mythopoetic world in which they live. Right? You actually go and get the physical animals. Right. So the prince is not like, oh, dad, this is really about you getting in touch with your like embodied inner feminine. And so the king like comes like and does a program with Artie and gets in touch with this embodied inner feminine. Right. They're in the mythopoetic land. They actually go out and get the animals. Okay. And it makes sense that when you have a dream, right, reading it from the concrete realm, you read it as mythopoetic. When you're in fairy tale and read a dream, when you're in the mythopoetic realm and you have a dream, you tend to read it concretely. Okay. Now it gets a little mind-bending because another question you can ask then regarding the dream within a dream is, well, actually, what state are we in right now in waking time? Right? Because when we've read these dreams, like, so when I read something and I read it mythopoetically, like, oh my gosh, that exactly explains my life. And let me tell you the details. I don't need to know the details. I'm just going to read the dream for you, and then you apply it as you see fit. But when I read dreams for people, like especially it's the first time, like all the blood drains from their face. They're like, "Holy shit, how did you know?" And it's like, I don't know anything about you. Like, I don't know you from anyone. But you're giving me this telegram from the other side, and I'm just reading the telegram. I don't know what it means for your life. I'm just reading the physics of it, and I'm handing it back to you. Right. And I mention all that basically to say for me, and hopefully for us, that now that we've done so many of these dreams and fairy tales together, the concrete and the mythopoetic are equally real. They're describing the same state of affairs within you, just using different language and different standards, right? So if I describe a scene using Chinese versus Sanskrit versus English, I'm still faithfully describing it, right? But there are certain nuances of worldview and how the brain works when you're using different languages that will be confusing and lost in translation, but also will bring out the deeper nuances of the actual reality we are describing. Okay, that's why like studying comparative religion through different languages is so powerful, because they're all looking at the same thing within us, but they're all describing it in a slightly different way because they're describing it using different languages, different physics of their worldview. So here, the Cartesian language is valid, and the mythopoetic language is valid as well. And so a fair question to ask is, when we are in the waking world outside looking in, are we, as we are now, in concrete, or are we in a dream? Right? That's the question that you could ask. And there are many other sort of perspectives on this. So, the English sort of Western worldview is that, no, we're waking, everything's Cartesian, everything, Enlightenment, Middle Age Enlightenment, Descartes, everything's concrete. The world is just, Brownian motion, billiard balls hitting each other. And basically this automatic, clockworks with a god or without a god, take your pick. But it's all just sort of dead stuff acting on each other, right? Well, that's one worldview, right? But as a sort of counterpoint, the standard, and I do mean standard Hindu worldview, is that all of reality is a dream. That the world we experience is a dream dreamt by a god. Okay. And in the Western tradition, right, you have hints of this as well, like Shakespeare, right? Just like Prospero says at the end of The Tempest, in Tempest Act 4. Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, we're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the basis and like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherits shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. So it's a funny question. What state are we in normal daily life? Are we in Cartesian existence, or are we in mythopoetic existence? This fairy tale that we're reading, potentially, right? The dream within the fairy tale of the three animals is potentially a dream within a dream within a dream. Right? So if our waking life is a dream, a fairy tale about a fairy tale, you then open the aperture of your mind. And you're able to take things simultaneously at the level of intellect and at the level of body. And it's a super magical sort of feeling, like a multi-channel sort of feeling. And I think for me, right, I think where I come out on this is that we can go one of two paths. One path is to say, approach this thing intellectually. We can say, well, how would this work then? Dream within a dream within a dream. And we try to sort of probe it and control it and predict and formalize, put an intellectual framework around it. So that's one way. That's not invalid. That's not invalid at all. That's very Cartesian, and that's fine. For instance, right? So when you have a movie about like time travel or some like mind bending, say like Christopher Nolan movie. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan, right? But then you have these intense discussions on the internet over time, over like, time travel and plot holes and these movies, and you're just having a blast, right? The other path is to say that real life is actually both Cartesian and mythopoetic, right? As the great visionaries view it. And so you in your own body, in your lived experience, you get to decide what the mix is, right? That's the gorgeous, delicious thing about being actually a mere mortal, and not a god, and not an archetype, and not eternal and unchanging, right? That's the thing you get in return, in exchange for being a being who is in a cycle that comes and goes, and then comes again, but that comes and goes, sort of birth, life, death. Right, the thing you get in return for not being eternal, even though you are at this other level, but in this sort of experience, is that you get to move through these phases. You get to choose, right, how you make the blend, because it is changeable, and you get to decide the mix. Right, that's why when we talk about bliss and I teach bliss, it is this thing we always say that, you know, it's to give you these tools to help you sort of design to your own taste, right? This work of art that is your life, and it's like everything we said about sacred and profane, right? That we say it's not that sacred is good and profane is bad. You need both, right? Life is both sacred and profane. You need both salty and sweet. What the mix is, what other flavor notes, aromatics you add in, that's all up to you. You decide, right? And the role of someone like me is not to tell you what to do, is to help you taste the flavor profiles of the different options. And then you decide what mix of flavors you like. Right? The best visionaries, creators, artists have a very powerful and potent mix of both. An artist, a working, productive artist, can see the vision of the snake maiden and then come back, have faith, pull out the shirt, and the three animals come dancing out. And to make it real, literally, in the concrete aspects of our world. They're not just dreamers, you know, castles in the sky and you never do anything. And they're not just technicians where like I can make anything happen, but I've zero vision on what I want to do. Right? The greatest visionaries and creators are both. And in the end, the greatest visionaries are also storytellers. And here's where the fairy tale thing hits on the nature of these things and the nature of reality, actually, not just as like Cartesian or mythopoetic, but the storytelling, physics and dynamics are the thing that enable you to carry payload from realm to realm to realm. Right? The thing that you bring out of the dream, within a dream. You don't wake up with an actual golden sort of snake in your shirt, right? You don't wake up next to the snake maiden, right? The snake maiden is within you, regardless of your gender, right? But what you do bring back up across the three levels is the narrative, are the mythopoetics, right? The mythopoetics is the rocket ship that enables you to bring payload across the realms. And so the most gifted storytellers will often tell stories in the form of a story within a story, of a dream within a dream, for this very reason. Because when you bring a narrative up across multiple levels of dream, it's like sending water, like it's like sending rainwater through like 500 base, sort of feet of shale and limestone, and the water at the end is like absolutely pure. Like whatever has made it through all those levels, is absolutely pure, real, and archetypal, right? That's why when we read fairy tales, we prefer to read fairy tales that are very old and that are not authored, right? Because when they're authored, like when you read Grimm brothers, they didn't write those fairy tales. They collected them from the people, from the folk tales, the people's oral tradition, and they collected them. Whereas when you read like Hans Christian Andersen, like the fairy tales for children he wrote, you just read them and you see all of his issues with his mom coming through. Now, if they survive another 500 years, then the essence of those stories will become more sort of pure, fairy tale archetypal fragments, right? But the most powerful stories are often stories within stories. So I remember when I was a boy, like reading Plato's Republic, I was blown away by the fact that this thing that everyone was talking about, right? Sort of Plato's Republic and the metaphor of the cave and the ideal republic and, you know, the watchers and who watches the watchers, all these concepts came from this, not like essay, but from this story, which was also, by the way, a story within a story. I was most fascinated by the fact that this thing that all these philosophers and intellectuals took, you know, basically into the disembodied monk path came from this story. And it wasn't just a story, right? It's a story within a story, because Plato's Republic is a story, right, about Plato telling a story about Socrates. Right? For those of you who read it, I mean, the first line of it is, you know, Plato saying, Plato writing that he himself said, I went down today, right, with Socrates to the town. And then these conversations happen within the story, right? A dream within a dream. And then also, you know, some of the most powerful, very powerful movies. I'll just name a few like that I like, right? So The English Patient, that movie from the 90s, the Count Almashi is telling the entire movie, story of the movie in a flashback. In Amadeus, right, the Milos Forman film of the 1980s, right, the whole film is a story about Salieri, telling about his lifelong rivalry with Mozart in flashback. Some of the short stories that have hit me, like Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, is a story about Marlowe telling about his story, about sort of, you know, taking his boat ride into the Congo, right, the Heart of Darkness. So movies and stories about a person telling a story, that extra level of depth puts you firmly in the mythopoetic realm, right? So screenwriters will call it suspension of disbelief, but it's specifically suspension of rules in our current Cartesian world. You don't suspend all rules when you suspend disbelief, just those in the Cartesian world. And so this itself is a form of nourishment, right? Because when the regular rules of, like, you know, you stop thinking about like your mortgage payment and, oh my gosh, is my parking meter going to run out while I'm watching this movie? All that sort of falls away. And because these rules are suspended, it is not a perfect proxy, but it's a close approximation of the rules of fear, threat, and control, of the profane, of the Cartesian as we experience it, become suspended as well. Right? So when you are in a dream, and then when you are in a dream within a dream, you become even more deeply ensconced into sacred space, right? The suspension of the rules of fear, threat, and control, which is what gives the nourishment itself. Right. So, for example, here in our live sacred space, we're feasting on the nourishment of sacred space. Right. We are the golden animals dancing, right, which is what is needed according to the dream for completion. So that's why these sessions are often so delightful, right? We're just having nerdy fun. There's no fear, threat, and control. This is not like a religion, right? It's just, we're just hanging out, doing our nerd healer thing. And even when I give interpretation, right? I mean, I'm always saying, and it's obvious, like no interpretation that I give is any kind of doctrine or anything like official or having authority, right? It's just my own sort of wild ass intuition. We're just dancing all on our own. And there is nourishment in just that, right? There is nourishment in just that. So I guess what I'm saying is, a dream within a dream tends to concentrate and amplify the octane of the nourishment of sacred space. When you're engrossed in a story that Gary's telling, when you're at the movies and you're in a dark room with other people, right, engrossed in this story, and then in certain instances like English Patient or Amadeus, it's a story within a story. You get pulled even more deeply into sacred space, and that itself is nourishing. Or you come out of the movie theater, you almost like don't even remember the plot, but you feel nourished somehow. Um, said another way, in our LSS Live Sacred Space sessions here, when I open sacred space and set sacred space, we're already in protected space and in the sacred, right? So we are already in sacred space here. Then, within sacred space, right, Gowry shows up, an aspect of our inner feminine, authority, inner feminine, right? And she tells a fairy tale, right? So within sacred space, we tell a fairy tale, dream within a dream. And then within the fairy tale, there is a dream as well. Right? And then my role here when I give my interpretation, which is not official, which is not something you have to take, but I give you a little bit of interpretation, and I call these entry points, basically so that you can have a bridge, a mythopoetic bridge to go back and forth. Right? Because one of the most frustrating things I used to experience when I was reading fairy tales, like this is way back, is that you read a fairy tale and it hits you at a deep level, you feel it, but it's like you can't actually articulate it intellectually. And it's like you're at the feast, but you're like behind a sheet of glass. It's like you can't actually, you can see the dessert, you can tell it's good, but you can't actually take in the pleasure of like the texture of the lemon curd or the sugar or whatever, right? So giving you a bit of literacy around mythopoetics gives you this bridge to go back and forth. So that when you're listening to Gowry tell a story, you can just let go and not worry about interpreting everything, because you know you will be bridged back to the intellectual with my help, right? So you can actually relax and let go during the story. So with Live Sacred Space, the fairy tale is already a dream within a dream, haha. And then when we tell a fairy tale with a dream inside, as we have today, it gets compounded even more, right? And then in the other direction, when I point out that real life can also be seen as a dream, the whole thing gets compounded even more. And when we do healing, by the way, sometimes when people say, I don't remember my dreams, I keep dreaming and I'm not able to capture it, it's really frustrating. I'll ask like, well, what's been happening in your outer life? And just for kicks, just for nerdy fun, I'll say, well, I don't know what you should say to, your toxic boss at work, but, my sort of disclaimer is always, instead of saying once upon a time, to slip you into mythopoetic realm, or in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, to slip you into the Star Wars mythopoetic realm. I'll say, well, I don't know what you should do in real life, whether you should quit your job or not, but if I were to read it as a dream, right? If you told me that and you said it was a dream, here's maybe what I would say. And then you're able to like suck the nourishment of the mythopoetics out of your like everyday sort of happenings as well. And so there's potentially 4 or 5 levels of dream between real life, through LSS, through fairy tale, and everything else. And that's fine. You don't need to intellectually capture it all, right? But at the end of the day, when you have this kind of almost embodied feeling, right, of like insight, of like something is significant here, I can't put my finger on it. And then you have the language of mythopoetics to say, oh yeah, I can't express this in English, but I can express this in, Taoistically inflected Chinese, right? And you have this other language, this more mythopoetic language. You're able to take out the nourishment and you can like just relax. And then after the session, you carry this feeling with you out throughout the rest of the week. And then into the next session. Haha. And a similar thing, and maybe we'll talk about this in the next 2 sessions, is as we come out of pandemic, pandemic itself, as we've said before, is this transformational space, this space of pressure and containment, which you voluntarily or not are in submission to, right? So you submit, you are contained, and then the third phase of transformation is, the butterfly comes out and there's enactment, right? So as we start to come out of pandemic with vaccines and everything else happening over the next, say, year, right? We'll slowly be sort of in the slow curtain way coming out of this movie theater. Not to say that the pandemic isn't real, but it is this dark containing womb in which stuff has happened, right? Mythopoetic insights have been shared. Things have happened. Cycles of 3 have happened within this year of pandemic, within this fairy tale, within this live sacred space. And as we come out, what is the feeling we come out with? What are the mythopoetics of our pandemic experience? Said another way, if we were to read all of pandemic as a dream, what kind of nourishment would we take out? And the answer is, I don't know. Right? All of your experiences are unique, but now you have this mythopoetic toolkit. It's something you can begin to think about. Only if you want. Only if you want. Right? So it's almost like potentially pandemic, if read as a dream, becomes this year-long live sacred space session with all of its mini stories within it as well. Okay, so I think that's all the notes I had. Gary, are you there? Do you have anything to add? Hi.
Thank you. Like I was in, like Inception in a meta level realm where I'm kind of completely forgotten what the original realm where I started off was. So.
Right, when you kind of come out of Inception, you're like, yo, where did I park my car? Do I even own a car?
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling right now. One of the things that struck me as you were explaining the perspective, and even when I was telling the story, one was about the muse. I mean, this was a point that I felt almost emotional thinking about it. Is the fact that in the story, the snake maiden makes this condition that the prince must not abandon her and must not take another wife. And it's kind of going back to the father's situation where
right.
He realizes, he can't have children with the first wife, so he marries again and takes a second wife. So it's almost like Snake Maiden's referencing that and saying, don't you do that to me.
Right.
And there was something very poignant about that. At the same time, very touching as well. I felt almost like my muse telling me, don't you run off doing other things when I'm right here to do this with you. And that is just amazing that she would, like you said, with such faith and also choose you in a way to partner with and to do this with, right? To kind of bring her vision forward.
And to have a little faith.
And to have faith, yeah.
If so I say the knots in your shirt will work, like, don't question me. Just get on with it.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you screw up, as you will, and you do question me, I'll roll my eyes, and then we'll have another go. We're here all week, right? We're not going anywhere.
Right. So, and in return, all I ask is you don't abandon me. And that to me was very, very touching. And as I felt that, I was like, yeah, that. I mean, she's not said that in so many words before, but that's kind of always understood, and it just hit me very hard at that moment. And
but also, I mean, let's be clear, right? At the meta level, because there is only one inner masculine, right? The king is one aspect, the brothers are another aspect, the prince himself is another aspect. And at the meta level, the king did lose faith, right? And did precipitate this situation where he had 3 sons. Okay.
Right.
And through all the story, dream within a dream, everything, where you forget like where you even parked your car, if we come back to the beginning, the king got the correct heir.
Right.
And everything still worked out fine, even though he failed in having faith in the beginning.
Right. Right.
And the muse presided over all of that.
Yeah.
And so on the ruthless cunning side, you can say, well, I can screw up however I want and it'll still be fine. And in a manner of speaking, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But on the other hand, you can read it from the other direction and say, well, that's unconditional love. Right. That is, right, the quintessence, the embodiment of unconditional love.
Yeah.
It's like, as a child, I was raised in the Catholic tradition. And as Catholics, we have this thing called confession, right? Where you can do anything you want and then go into confession. And the scoundrel view of that is like, well, I can do anything I want, go into confession. And the other view is like, wait, I can do anything I want, and it's still okay. And you're like overcome with this feeling of like grace and unconditional love. And then the nun like slaps you and says, hey, Arthur Wu, pay attention. Sorry. Continue. What were you saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey, like you said. It's a transformational journey. It's a journey of various stages of initiation, of insight, of learning, of circumambulation. And you do all of that, and you come back and you realize, okay, so this is what I was meant to do. And it's interesting that you say that, because if you notice the different aspects of the feminine, right, the elder queen and the younger queen. The younger queen and her sons are unable to provide any kind of insight into the dream.
Yeah, they don't even try. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't even try. It's kind of congruous with what the other things we know of the younger queen is that she has this insecurity. She is constantly of the fear that she will be sidelined and overthrown. So she kind of has to play this politics and push the other queen away so that she feels safer. So when you're in that realm of the profane, which is all fear, threat, control, she can't offer any insight into the dream, nor can she offer any guidance to her sons on how to go about finding the golden apples, right? Whereas the elder queen is able to do that. So, but at the same time, there is that tiny detail of the story where it's the younger of the two sons actually makes the suggestion to the king that maybe you should ask the other son as well. Maybe he's the one who actually prods the king in that direction.
Even in the depths of the profane, you have an inkling of where to go. Yeah.
So there is that kind of hint of a harmony that already exists amidst all this conflict. So I think it's, like you said, it's a journey. You fumble and you fall and you kind of make all these wrong turns, but you eventually land up there anyway. And the entire story just gives the whole physics of how you land up there, which is amazing. And the other aspect also that I felt when you were telling the aspect of the intellectual realm, the intellectual phase with the monks, right, the 3 months. There was also that hint of masculine elder initiation, where before he gets to the final snake maiden muse feminine, the prince will have to go through these 3 male elders, right, and sit with them and cook a pot of meal
in the forest.
In the forest,
like with the tiger in that other story, right?
Yeah, and they
boy and the tiger.
Their own time. I mean, you're not in a rush to kind of send him away, saying, no, I'm not the guy to talk to. Please go find the other guy. They take their time. They cook a meal with him. They eat with him. And they spend the night in the camp, in front of the fire. And then in the morning, he sets out for the next task. So it's kind of, he has to go through that phase. I mean, he can't jump skip, and kind of say, okay.
In his body. He doesn't just text them and they like refer him to the next guy.
Right, yeah.
He goes in his body and sits with them.
And he has to go through that way. So there is that amazing map and a blueprint that the story gives, that, these are all these phases before you get to this. And you eventually get there anyway. But the essence that it boils down to when you finally get to the point is, embodiment and faith and learning through all of these cycles. So that was really amazing what the story said.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I want to kind of touch on the dream, the dream animals. Is when the last time you asked me when we were discussing it, you asked me, is the leopard feminine for you? And I said yes. And what's the snake? And I was like, yeah, the snake comes up a lot in my dreams, and she is definitely feminine. But it was something that I couldn't catch on. And then you asked me, is the monkey feminine or masculine? And I'm not sure. It seems like both, but I don't know. So I spent time, because essentially when I read this dream and I saw the three animals, it's almost like I could recognize them from the dreams I've had over the past few years. And I've had come in my dreams, a leopard, a monkey, and I've had a snake showing up all through my life. And so I was trying to kind of catch on to, where have I seen this particular kind of mixture of these animals, and when was the last time, what did it say? So I was kind of trying to grab onto that. And as I thought through, this is something that occurred to me, that the leopard is definitely a symbol of the feminine, of grace, particularly of being comfortable in her skin and in her environment, moving through a forest, moving through her environment, moving in her body with grace and with absolute comfort and confidence. So that's what the leopard, and as a feminine symbol.
And I love that.
Yeah, and monkey is masculine, yes, in the sense that when I first had that dream of a monkey on my back, and this again a feline, chasing after me and then grabbing the monkey off my back. So that was the dream image I had.
I remember that dream.
Was that eternally, like you say, monkey mind in one of your sessions, is that chattering, anxious, but also at a very basic survival level.
Right.
The one that constantly strives to fight and survive in the jungle, right? So there's something about the survival instinct in the monkey. There's something about constantly being on the lookout, constantly watching, protecting, self and others.
Fear, threat, and control. Fear, threat, and control. Yeah.
Yes. And at a very basic level, it's like the Muladhara chakra, right? It's hanging on to existence, hanging on survival. So that's masculine. And the snake then comes in, and I've always had this ambiguity with the snake, even though I kind of look at her as a feminine.
Yeah.
And when a snake shows up in dreams, it's always about transformation. Or it's also about bridging the gap between this realm and that realm, whatever those realms are. But the snake acts as a messenger between two realms. It could be, the deep unconscious realm to the conscious realm. It could be, like you say, the mythopoetic to the real and concrete. It almost feels like the snake is comfortable in both realms. I mean, a snake can be underground or above ground. Snake can be in water, on land, even in the trees. The snake can inhabit any of these realms and be comfortable in every realm. But almost always we think of the snake as something that is beneath the ground. It's so.
And I mean, a snake can be of the spirit realm. A snake can fly, right? A flying snake is called a dragon.
Yeah.
Or a butterfly, right? Is a flying snake. Yeah.
So you have all of these aspects, and comfortable in any realm. So when it appears in a dream, it almost feels like it's a messenger come specifically to deliver a message, and also because of its ability to shed its skin and be reborn. It brings in a message of transformation as well. So when I see these three animals, standing in line and kind of dancing together, to me it's like this story also talks about the transformation the masculine goes through in the entire cycle, the transformation from the younger queen having preference to moving to the elder queen aspect, and then moving to the snake maiden aspect. There is evolution of the feminine aspect as well. And all of them come together and there is harmony at the end. You find that the animals are dancing together. So it's almost a reflection of that. So that's what came to me when I was pondering over that. So I wanted to share that.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Huh. That's very good. Thank you.
Saying something when I was talking about the animals.
What's that?
You were saying something when I was mentioning the animals, particularly the snake, I think.
No. I mean, I was just thinking more simply at when you talked about those three aspects, regardless of the inner masculine and inner feminine, it's that fear, that everyday fear of the profane. The snake is like the more visionary kind of sacred. And the leopard, as you described it, was very much embodiment to me, like being comfortable in her own skin. And then the more simplistic thought of just like, the correct inner masculine, the correct direction of the kingdom is the force within you, or the sensibility within you, that can ultimately make those three in harmony.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not, you don't just want fear to be the king in the profane, the monkey. You don't just want vision, and you don't just want embodiment. You want all three in harmony together. So yeah, that's the only thing that came to me when I was listening to you.
Amazing, thank you. And you have an embodiment exercise to do this week?
I think that's a strong word, but yeah, we can try something. We can try something this week. Okay, thank you, Gary. Okay, so that's it for the sort of talk section, and now we'll do our exercise for the week, and then we'll close the session. And I don't know exactly how this will go. We'll just give it a try. But since we're talking about embodiment and the message we keep getting hit over the head with of like, actually do it, right? Just actually do it. Don't just talk about it. I was thinking that maybe we can just do a little bit of an embodiment sort of exercise right now. Now, of course, we're online. We're not in a room together. So this will still have to be a bit on the visualization side. I mean, we're certainly not set up to sort of do a whole movement thing. And as all exercises in sacred space, you do this only if you want. Right? Remember the fourth principle of Presidian sacred space: no expectation of participation. So I'll guide you through this. You can call it a kind of meditation. And what's interesting is that when we talk about dream within a dream, generally speaking, we have said in the past that a fairy tale within sacred space is like a dream within a dream. And you can sort of say the same for meditation as well. It's a different kind of story. And so meditation during a session like this can also be considered as a kind of dream within a dream, where all the forces are kind of more concentrated into a shot of tonic, right? Instead of a more dilute bowl of soup. So only if you want. Let's try this now for a few minutes. And the way we would do this is for you to sit however you want, however you are sitting or standing or relaxing. There's no special posture we need. And then importantly, during the meditation, as you feel you need to adjust, you go ahead and adjust however you want to adjust. However feels good to you, delightful to you in any given moment. You can even get up and move if you like. And so the way we'll start is you just start by taking a deep, gentle breath. However deeply you would like. And to go ahead with eyes open or closed, to go ahead and make your eyes soft. And the way you would make your eyes soft is to just imagine you are looking at a cute little baby or puppy or kitten, and how your eyes soften when you see that. Smile from your heart. And then I think with your eyes closed, you can go ahead and imagine a dark kind of ball in your chest, right? Like a sphere or an egg. Maybe it's a little bit sooty or dusty. And as you're regarding it, the shell of this ball starts to flake off like an egg, and a kind of golden light shines through. Now, this golden light is thick. It has a viscosity to it, like honey or sweet butter, right? That's sort of softened. And if you would, you can, if you want, you can imagine this golden thick light, viscous light, filling your torso, coming out from this golden ball in your chest. Filling your torso, and at the same time, still shining self-luminously, infinite in all directions. This golden light is you. And then you can feel this thick, soft, viscous golden light, like honey or sweet butter, flowing down your torso, through your legs, filling them down past your knees, through your calves and shins, into your ankles, into your feet, and coming out slowly through your toes and filling them. And also you can imagine this thick, soft golden light, like honey or sweet butter, filling your entire torso and then filling up and flowing out through your shoulders, down into your upper arms, flowing slowly past your elbows and through them, through your forearms, into your wrists, filling them softly, through your hands, filling your hands, and dripping out slowly through your fingers, so that your fingers now are dripping with soft golden light. And then finally, this thick, soft golden light rising up through your torso, through your neck, slowly filling your entire head, your nasal cavity, your sinuses, your brain, with soft, thick, golden light, with a gentle viscosity like honey or sweet butter. Coming out through the top of your head, the middle of the top of your head, like a fountain. And then this thick, soft, golden light spilling from the outside over your body, down on your head, like you're in a shower, pouring like a fountain down over you and onto your whole body, over your skin, down the back and sides of your neck, onto your shoulders, down your chest and along the outsides of your legs and arms and fingers and toes. The strength of this fountain coming up out of the top of your head of thick golden light is as fast or as gentle as you would like. Your whole being is fountaining up, and your body is dripping with golden light. It's all a big mess, and it feels pretty good. This now is the essence of your delight, for no good reason. Let this golden light reign over you and flow through you, and you can take nourishment from it, but also you are it. This golden dripping light is you, even when it is hidden from view, even when it is covered over from the view of others, even when it is covered over from your own view. It is always there within you. Good. So now take a slow, gentle breath, as deep or shallow as you would like. And when you are ready to come out, you don't have to come out. You can start moving your head back and forth a little bit, just to get things flowing. And then you can start, again, only when you're ready and only if you want, moving your shoulders up and down just a little bit around, just to get the juices flowing again. You can wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. Move your torso just a little bit, slowly, slowly, no rush. Take another slow, gentle breath, as deep or shallow as you feel like. And when you're ready to come out fully, go ahead and touch your face with your fingers. Touch your head, only when you're ready. Touch your arms, touch your body, touch your legs a bit. And you can relax into the feeling of your body, re-emerged, still having that feeling of golden light because it is you, and ready to move on to the next thing whenever you feel like it. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed that. Welcome back if you've come back. But regardless, you can go ahead and sit there as long as you like. And in the background, I'll just quietly close out the session. I'll leave you there, and you can just enjoy the rest of your day. Okay? So in closing out the session, I'll just, let's see here. I'll just drop the link to the next session in the chat here. Our next session is next Sunday. It's free, open to the public. Invite others as you would like. And I hope to see you there. And in closing the session now, I will just say that I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. And thank you for holding this space with me and us. And thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, and the spiritual nourishment of the shared sacred space with me and with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, bathed in light, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, and I will see you all in the next session. Happy Sunday, everyone.